new attorney, Victor Afanador, is right here. So he will be listening as well. So the first speaker is Ron Simoncini.
Ron Simoncini, Moscow Taxpayers Association. Appreciate being here tonight and having you guys listen to both the perspectives of tenants and landlords on the amendments that you circulated. The first issue of business, I think, here is that as a city, Hoboken has a very broken rent control ordinance and an even more broken regulatory body. And I think that when we look at what these amendments are in and of themselves, these amendments have, I think, the right objective, but I do not think that they go nearly far enough in addressing the issue of property rights and property ownership in Hoboken. Having said that, my comments are going to come in two categories. The first category is, what are those things that are represented in this set of amendments that need further consideration and perhaps moderate adjustment?
Can you speak a little
And then the
louder?
second issue is, what will we be looking at in the future of rent control in Hoboken, and how will this set of amendments not address what the real issues are? So I'll take the first section first, and I've got this is a set, and I just want to make sure that my remarks are heard in the record. The first issue is in the proposed amendment 155-4B, which says in part that we would be required to obtain a tenant's signature on every lease or renewal, that they have received certain documents from us. There's no reason to do that more than once. It should be that on a new lease, the landlord should be required to obtain the signature in order for the tenant to sign the lease. That is the only moment where the landlord can assure that the tenant performs. Once the tenant who's already in place is in place, there's no way the landlord can assure that the tenant performs. The tenant now has the right to a perpetual residence in that apartment as a rental, given no change of condition. And at that point, the landlord can only request a signature. So it isn't enforceable the way that it is, and we would like it to just be a one-time thing. Now, right now, we understand that you want the tenancy to understand the change in the law. And so if you're requiring us to notice them that there's been a change in the law and request that they acknowledge that they've received it, we will do that. But we would like it to satisfy our obligation to say that we did send out a request that they acknowledge that we've informed them. And if they don't respond to that request, our proof that it was delivered should be enough for you. The second issue relative to what's happening in the current ordinance is there's a section that talks about, to the extent that such increases are in excess of those to which this is amended. It's confusing language. It's adopted from the old ordinance. We have language here that we would like to submit as a prospective replacement for that. And then finally,
What's the language?
I don't want to use my 5 minutes that way. I'll be happy to distribute this to you later. And finally, I think that the issue of the alternative proofs of rent and vacancies, that is something that certainly is at the heart of what we're talking about here. There's a clarification of the language that we'd like to consider there too. And I'm going to use the balance of my time to talk about some things that we haven't addressed that I think are critical. The first is, when the court says to you, you do not have reliable records, and you don't change the base year to leapfrog over the unreliability of your records, you're passing a dishonest ordinance. Now, I know you're not addressing that here, and you're keeping essentially the base year as you have it now, but it's not right. They've already said, if you go back beyond a certain point, you don't have a reliable record. How can you have a base year that's reliant on those records when you know they're not reliable? To me, that doesn't make sense. The second issue is vacancy decontrol. It's not addressed in this issue, and I've spoken or heard each of you speak on vacancy decontrol, and I recognize the ideological issues on vacancy decontrol. But the fact of the matter is, new tenancies in Hoboken are people who come from out of town. You're depriving the town of revenues, property rateables, and the landlord of the opportunity to improve the property when you say to the landlord, you must provide that new tenant with the same rights as the tenant who may have been in tenure for 20 years before him. It just doesn't make sense. I know you can't address it in this, but I feel as though this is a report card here. You've done a good job with the things that you put in. But if you look at 2 years of discussion, is it really a good job if we haven't addressed the elemental issue of reform? And the final issue for me is the exemption for 1 to 4 unit homeowners. If we truly are committed to rental housing in Hoboken, we must exempt 1 to 4 units. Because as soon as one of those units is vacated, the owner converts. So if you want to maintain rental housing in Hoboken, in 1 to 4 unit buildings, you have to exempt it. Because there's no reason for them not to convert. I understand the ideology behind saying anything that was ever a rental should forever be a rental. But all that does is sentence you to more of what you have already, which is 20,000 units in 1987 and 80,000 units in 2001. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to also put on my record, if anybody wishes to submit their testimony in writing, if there's not adequate time or any response to any of the comments made, please feel free to do that at the clerk's office. Joe Murray.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'll try to be brief. I moved into Hoboken in 1977. I'm an owner-occupier of 515 Garden Street, which I purchased, I believe it was in '83. I don't think this goes far enough. I don't think everyone will be satisfied. I think well, if I might follow up on something. I might disagree with the 4 units. I think the state makes a distinction between owner-occupied 2 or less rental units. It's called Section 53. The owner of those buildings has a significantly different set of rights, and the tenant has a different set of rights than a landlord of a greater building or a building that the landlord doesn't occupy. That's covered by the anti-eviction statute. I think the ordinance should, in the future, address that distinction. And I think it should address it for a good reason. The block I live on is slowly being converted to condos. And why is it being converted to condos? Because the owners cannot get a reasonable rent on the buildings they occupy, where they charge the rent just to meet taxes and expenses. They're not making money. This is where they live. And they're being forced, because of this, to sell their property because they can't carry it. Now, if that's what the city wants, fine. That's what the city will end up with. A transitional neighborhood of people moving in, condoing, moving out, renting the condo spaces, etc. I do think that the provision about the disclosure statement, I like the idea of disclosure, but the way it's worded, a month-to-month tenancy, which, by the way, is what my tenant has. My one tenant has a month-to-month. That tenancy begins each and every month. You want me to give a disclosure statement each and every month? I don't think that's what you intend. So I think we have to address that. I do agree that when a person signs a new lease, they should be given all their rights, remedies, disclosure, etc., so that everyone is on the same playing field. I do commend you for the work you've done. I don't think it goes far enough. I hope the subcommittee will continue to function to address the other issues. I think that it's time now for the matter to go, not before this portion of the matter, not to go before the subcommittee ad nauseum, but to go to the full committee and let the committee make its decision. Thank you for the work you've done. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Scott Siegel.
Scott Siegel, 923 Castle Terrace, Manager, members of the board.
Excuse, is the speaker on? Some of us can't hear.
Is you gonna, I'll speak a little louder, is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, no problem at all. I want to talk about part A, where it says that The refund and or claim against this rent should be barred. The tenant's request for legal rent calculation is not made for 2 years of the start of his or her tenancy. Would that mean that if, let's say, for example, I still live at 206 Hudson for 20 years, would that be barred from making a claim? If so, I think that's wrong. We're basically punishing anybody who's lived here more than 2 years in 1 day, the way I read this, so that should be corrected. Standard contract law for breach of contract, I understand, is a 6-year term, generally and a lease to me is a contract signed by 2 people. So why it's not following standard contract law is I don't think you should ever go back decades. I agree from Australia. I think that's wrong. But I think if you follow standard contract law 6 years, I think that would be very useful. Also, just for people that otherwise, because they're able to give you documents, so they can show vacancy decontrol, capital improvements, and things like that. So I think that would take out a large number of the truthful, good landlords. All that we left when this is done are people that made very poor due diligence, made a stupid investment, or people who charge legal rents. And to grandfather in people who made illegal rents, and look at them 2 years when the rents are illegal, to me I have a problem with that. I think the standard contract law would cover that. Also, I don't think the rent, I could be wrong with this, but we understand, I don't think the rent is for the value for the property taxes. I don't think that's a misnomer. The way I understood it was, it's the quality and size of your unit. I've never heard of the rent roll. I could be wrong. I don't pay property tax, I don't know. But I think that should be looked into as well. And also, the landlord also, if they do have problems with taxes and insurance, something called hardship. They can go to the rent leveling board and show hardship, and I see no reason why that would be a problem. To me, that'd be a very reasonable request by somebody. And the other thing too, I think, I'm not sure if it's done this way or not, but I think every tenant, when they first move in, and then every tenant that exists now, there should be a form that they should sign, maybe on the rent registration form, where the tenant signs it, the landlord signs it, and they acknowledge they got the receipt of that book. I ain't gotten a copy from Suzanne upstairs. It's a very good book of tenant rights. I think it's described in here. I think that should be mandatory, and that's what potentially both the landlord and the tenant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark, Bill, Mark?